All right, and greetings from the fabulous southbound I-95 rest area in lovely Massachusetts. It's time once again for another episode of Riding, or until I find my GoPro, Parking with Rick. So today I want to address a question that has been asked to me multiple times. I'm recording this on December 2nd. It is the 2nd, right? Still? It is December. I'm sorry, December 3rd. Today's December 3rd. It all runs together sometimes. So, today's December 3rd, and apparently it's the International Day of for persons with disability awareness or something like that. There's a bunch of different ways, bunch of different things people have called it, but um, today seemed like a good day to talk about a question that people have asked me when I tell them about the work I've done with the kids from camp or the folks I talked about in my last video. Is they'll ask me some variant of the question, how do you talk to them? Or what do you do with them? Or sometimes both. And it actually comes down to something that when I spoke in my last video about realizing that these folks weren't able to do the same uh, kid stuff. I hate to use the term normal because it's such a loaded term. Um, it boiled down to I was trying to be aware of what I at the time called their personness. So it's a term now, the more modern term is called presuming competence. And this is something that everybody can do, everybody should do. Um, and what it basically boils down to is that when you are interacting with someone, whether they're disabled or not, um, you should always assume that that person is able to think and understand things and form opinions and is aware of what you're talking to them about at the same level as anyone else would be, age appropriate, of course. Um, and it's kind of a long-winded explanation, but the example I can give you is this. If you are looking for a car part, say you need a new headlight, right? So you go to the car parts store, and you're assuming that the person behind the counter is able to, first off, understand what you're asking for, what a car headlight is, okay, and is able to, maybe they don't know it off the top of their head, but they're able to find that headlight that you might need for your 1984 Chevette. That's essentially a very similar concept to presuming competence. It also means that you're talking to and assuming the person is able to understand at that age level. Um, yeah, for example, I have a friend of mine, one of my closest friends. He uses a wheelchair to get around. And if someone looks at him, they might assume that, well, he's just a guy in a wheelchair and doesn't really know very much or is not really, you know. But when you talk to him, you realize this is a person who's just as smart as anyone else. He's into electronics. He's got his ham radio license like I do. He's a black belt in several martial art forms. Um, very intelligent. And if I walk up to him and said, "Hey, make sure you go potty before we go bye-bye," he's going to feel like he's about 3 inches tall. Of course, knowing him, he'd probably come up with a nice snarky response, but besides that, when even if a person's physical differences may not appear that they're able to see, hear, think, or understand, you need to assume that they can. When we look at examples, maybe the most famous example that people would understand would be the late Stephen Hawking. I mean, you look at him and he's pretty much motionless, yet he was one of the greatest minds of modern science, and he was able to communicate with appropriate supports just as well as anyone else could. So that's essentially what presuming competence is. But let's also talk about what it's not. It does not mean you're expecting someone to function without support. Again, using the example I just mentioned about the late Stephen Hawking, he could function and interact perfectly fine when he had with his computer that he was using. He controlled it with a twitching a muscle on his cheek or in his eye. I've had plenty of friends who were unable to speak, but could communicate just fine once you took the time to understand them. It also means that it does not mean that you should, or part of this given the appropriate support, also means that you've got to communicate with them in the way they can understand. I have a deaf friend that if he's sitting here watching this video, he's not going to understand what I'm saying unless he turns the captions on. He may be able to read lips, I'm not sure. But if I have someone sitting here signing next to me or signing what I'm saying to him, or again, doing the captions, he can understand just fine. He's able to evaluate what I'm saying and form an opinion and make a response. It also does not mean giving someone a pass for poor behavior. And there's a fine line with that, of course. If someone may not have good control of their body. One of my good friends had cerebral palsy. Couldn't control his limbs, so if I happen to be in the swing radius and he happened to have his arms swing out and not wanting it to, and he whacks me upside the face, well, that's one thing. It just happens. But on the other hand, being a jerk is being a jerk, disabled or not. So you have to walk that fine line. Give them the support they need to understand what's happening. Understand that maybe what they're doing is if it's something they can control, they just don't know. Help them to understand better. It also doesn't mean that you have to agree with a person or even like the person. In fact, it's more respectful to have a discussion with someone, again, disabled or not, or using whatever mode of communication that they need. If you disagree with what they're saying, you can have a discussion about it. Maybe you'll learn something. Maybe the other person might learn something. And you can certainly presume competence in someone, even if you don't like them. Again, being a jerk is being a jerk, whether they're disabled or not. And it does not mean letting them slide by making things or setting your expectations to a lower standard. All too often, we see kids and people in general that are perfectly smart, perfectly capable, even if that intelligence may not be fully unlocked in the person in the form of communication. We see oftentimes folks, especially those who need a lot more support in a physical sense, are placed in situations, or they're placed in in school, for example. They might be put in a lower level class, or given, I read a story once about an autistic teenager who, before he was able to communicate, they had him in classes saying, he's working on counting to 10. And this was, again, a teenager. But once he was able to to communicate, he was able to express just how frustrating that was for him. And they put him in an age similar math class, and he excelled at it. So that's my piece. Essentially, it boils down to the golden rule: treat people the way you want them to treat yourself, the way you'd want to be treated yourself. And it's really very simple. It may be a little challenging to get that communication going in presuming competence, but even if the person doesn't have the ability to communicate back, or you don't know how to communicate back with that person, you can still talk to them, treat them just as you would anyone else, and you can assume or presume that they're understanding you, even if they don't show it. And look on the bright side. What's the worst that can happen? If the person is aware and intelligent and able to understand you, you've at least treated them well. And even if the person may not understand what you're saying or may not be aware of what's going on around them, at least you tried. And it's always better to err on the side of treating someone well, treating someone the way you'd want to be treated, rather than going up to someone who might be a person my age, okay, or somewhere, or an adult anyway, and looking at them, and they may not have good control of their body or the ability to communicate or whatnot, and talking to them like they're a 2-year-old. You know, in that case, you've treated someone in a very demeaning manner. So, well, that's my piece for today, and make sure you let me know in your comments. If you're watching us on YouTube, we'll tell you the obligatory like, share, subscribe, and ring that bell. And until next time, I'm Rick the Geek. Thanks for watching.